One of the main questions we get from women going through the divorce process is, what's a wife entitled to in the divorce? The answer is pretty simple. The same thing as a man. They're treated equally in the divorce process. About half your stuff and relatively close to equal time with your kids. That's what a wife is probably entitled to in divorce in the state of Texas. One of the top concerns women have when entering the divorce process is, can I get alimony or spousal maintenance? And the lawyer answer is, it depends. The first thing you need to consider is, have you been married for 10 years or more? That's the normal threshold question for whether or not you can qualify to get spousal maintenance in Texas. If you've only been married 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, I don't care if your spouse makes a gajillion, bajillion dollars. More than likely, unless there is domestic violence or you have a disabled child together, you won't be getting spousal maintenance. You need to have been married 10 years or more. So let's say you've been married 10 years or more, or you will be by the time of the divorce. Okay, so then the next question is, are you able to provide for your minimum reasonable needs without the spousal maintenance? So that means based on your job or your separate property you get in the divorce or the amount of funds you get from the community in the divorce, are you able to pay for your minimum reasonable needs? Ladies, that probably does not include Botox, but can you pay your rent? Can you pay your car note? Can you pay your car insurance, stuff like that? And if you can, you're not going to get spousal maintenance from the court. You may get it in mediation through a deal with your spouse, but the court's not going to award it. They're like, look, you've got enough money to cover. You're not going to get spousal maintenance. Because one thing that always shocks women about spousal maintenance in Texas is there is a presumption against it, meaning an assumption you're not going to get it unless you can prove that you've been married at least 10 years and you were unable to provide for your minimum reasonable needs without it. And then the two other areas that work a little bit differently would be if you are raising a child with that's disabled or you have some sort of a disability. If there's disability involved, then it can be a bit more tailored to your situation, like an adult child with autism, or you suffered a stroke or something awful, right? That limits your ability to provide for yourself or for them. Then you might be able to get more money and for longer, and maybe even if you haven't been married the 10 years. And domestic violence can kind of change the whole game and be one way a court can be a bit punitive with the abuser. Now, the other thing women are wanting to know when they're getting divorced about spousal maintenance is, how much money can I get? And that depends on how long you've been married and how much the other party makes. So the thing I'll tell you that's a plot ruiner is it's probably not as much money as you would think or you would want. Because Hollywood gives us this idea that you're going to be able to get divorced and live in the manner to which you're accustomed. And maybe you're accustomed to, like where I'm at right now, there's a big dining room table with 12 chairs sitting around it in a big fancy house. You're not necessarily going to be able to get enough spousal maintenance to cover that same lifestyle after the divorce. So the best thing you can do is get realistic quickly about what your options are. So let's say you've been married 10 years. The amount of spousal maintenance is calculated based off of the gross available resources of the person who would be paying. So what that means is, like, how much money do they bring in a month? And then you calculate either 20% or $5,000, whichever is less. So that means $5,000 would be the cap, like in that initial window, $5,000 as the cap, or 20%, which may be significantly less. But say they make $20 million a month. The code would say the most you're going to get is $5,000. Now, it can increase a little bit in terms of length of time and how much you can get if you've been married longer, but think in terms of a few $1,000s for a few years after the divorce. And that usually comes as a pretty hard reality for women who think they're going to be provided for the rest of their lives, because what the family code says as the maximum, that $5,000 and like 5 years, is probably not going to happen. It's usually going to be a little bit less than that for a less period of time. And certainly at mediation, that's normally what you see, would be some sort of a situation where maybe there was a stay-at-home spouse and we have a working parent, and then the spousal maintenance question, and it can go either way, y'all, men or women, okay? But you'll settle on something like $2,000 to $3,000 maybe for over a period of 2 or 3 years till they get back on their feet. Maybe they get a little bit more money in the divorce or something like that, but it's not going to be some big windfall and just pay for the rest of your life. Because the idea is the court wants you and the legislature wants you to get back on your feet and provide for yourself instead of relying on this spousal maintenance money to make that happen for you. But probably the result in your situation would surprise you, and you're really going to want to talk to a lawyer about what would happen most likely in your unique situation, given the length of your marriage, the situation with your kids, and how much money the other party makes. One of the top questions women ask when getting divorced is, how long can I get spousal maintenance or alimony payments? And the thing is, the state of Texas in the Texas Family Code has pretty strict requirements for how long that you can receive that money. The maximums, if you've been married between 10 years and 20 years, is 5 years. If you've been married between 20 and 30 years, it's 7 years. And between 30 years and up, it's 10 years. So even if you've been married for 30 years, the maximum amount of time that the court would award you spousal maintenance or alimony is 10 years. So don't get in your head that, hey, I married a rich guy and he makes a bunch of money and we had some kids, so he's going to pay me for the rest of my life. That's not how it works, except in the movies or in some states, maybe like California and Oregon, I've heard. I don't really know, but I think. But here, it's a lot more strenuous and a lot more strict than that. One thing that's like pretty different is if you have a disabled child, the duration and all of that isn't limited in the same way, because it's just totally a different set of circumstances that the court would consider the needs of that child, the needs of the family, and enter something that's pretty tailored to you guys. Women in Texas considering divorce need to understand the basic concept of how community and separate property works, because that's how a court is going to split up the money. Whatever's community is going to pretty much be split down the middle, half to you, half to your spouse. Whatever's separate, you're going to take it with you. So what would help in understanding how property will be divided for women upon divorce is to understand the way community and separate property work. So the way I always explain this is think about a number line, like when we were in school. And remember, you had -10 way over here, +10 way over here, and 0 in the middle. I want you to think of the date of your marriage as the 0 point. And everything that happened prior to the date of the marriage, all of the money, all of the assets, all of the businesses, boats, paintings, whatever that you owned, that's going to be yours. And likewise, what he owned is going to be his. The court cannot award your separate property to the other person. So like, let's say you love that condo he had whenever y'all got married and y'all go there to the lake every year and you really want that condo. You're not going to get it. A court literally cannot give it to you. Maybe they could agree to it to give it to you in mediation, but a court can't. Okay, so the main thing you're going to focus on is from the date of marriage forward. Everything bought or acquired during the marriage is going to be considered community property. And there's a presumption pretty much that 50-50 would be a just and right division of your estate. It would be equitable and it would be fair. So something like 50% of the estate is what a woman will get in the divorce, absent some pretty extenuating circumstances like really salacious cheating, infidelity situation, disability of one of the parties or the children, domestic violence. That can change things, but for the most part, that's how property will be divided for women in divorce. One other component of separate property that people sometimes have a hard time with is how gifts and inheritance are treated. So remember our number line, everything that happened prior to marriage is separate, everything after is community. The exception would be if you get gifts or inheritance from people during your marriage and you keep it separate and you track it and don't commingle it, those are your separate property and are not subject to division. So it's one little bit of a wonky thing that can get more complicated than it sounds in a little social media video, but you need to keep that part straight when you're thinking about how your assets will be divided upon divorce. A common misconception by women getting divorced is that if their name's not on the thing, they don't get to take the thing. That's not true. Here's the deal. Texas follows what's called the Inception of Title rule. And that means that you have to determine when did title vest in the thing. And remember our number line example of how separate property and community property works. So when did you have the right to the thing? Was it before you got married or after you got married? Let's assume for the purposes of this discussion that we're talking about a house. And your husband bought a house in only his name. His name's on the mortgage, his name's on the deed, and yours isn't. But it happened during the marriage. Okay, when did title vest? It vested during the marriage. That means it's on the community property section of the number line. So it's both of y'all's, even if it's only in his name. I don't care what he tells you. That's the way it works. That house will be subject to division according to the way your estate is divided. So probably something like 50-50. Same thing with the car. If you have a car and it's only in your name, you're like, that's my minivan. That's my car. I'm taking it with me at the end of this divorce. It doesn't have anything to do with him. I pay for it with my money from my job and it's only in my name. All right, same question. When did title vest? If title vested after the date of marriage, during the community property phase, it's going to be subject to division. So just because it's in your name doesn't mean you're going to take the minivan. So you really have to consider with each and every asset. Physical assets are easy to kind of talk about, but what about stock accounts, bonuses, and things that are intangible? It works the same way. A key one is about a bonus at work. People get this wrong all the time. What they'll say is, oh, that's money from my job, so that's my money. Okay, number one, when did title vest to that money? While you were working during the marriage, so it's both of y'all's. I don't care whose job it came from. I don't care whose bank account it went into. It's both of y'all's dollars if it came from your job during the marriage and you don't have a marital agreement that says otherwise. But bonuses are a little bit trickier, especially during the year of divorce. So you got to think about, when did your right to get that bonus vest? So let's say you're in 2023. You're looking at 2023. So 2023's money, okay? You do this work all year long in 2023, and then in 2024, you get paid out in June. But say your divorce is final on December 31st of 2023. Most people would think that the bonus paid out next year in 2024, I don't even have that money. It's not subject to division. That's not how it works. Your right to that bonus, most likely, per your employment agreement, was based on the services performed in 2023. So that future bonus, if, as, and when you receive it, is subject to division during your divorce because your title vested in it. Your right to have that bonus occurred in the year prior while you were still married. So this is a very important point, especially ladies. We get this wrong all the time. And guys, for you to understand so you don't fight against this happening in your divorce, if you are entitled to that bonus because of the work you performed while you were still married, it's subject to division during divorce. And all the time I see this where people think they've made their own deal, they've made their own agreement, and then they come to me and I'm like, what about any bonuses? And usually the guy's like, I don't have any bonus yet. And I'm like, well, are you working now and are you entitled to some sort of a commission? Well, yeah, but I won't get it till next year. Well, what was the work that is going to get you that money? Oh, well, it was stuff I did this year. Well, you're still married, right? Right. So we have to divide it. It's hard to get your brain around, but it'll go better for you the sooner you can get that figured out, because it just is what it is. And it may not feel all that fair. And I totally do get that because you don't have it yet, but that's just the way the community property scheme works in Texas. A common misconception when people are getting divorced in Texas is that once you file for a divorce, it's some very magic date that sort of changes the way all of the money and stuff works. Like, hey, well, I filed for divorce on September 1st. So everything that happens after September 1st is mine. We're like not even really married anymore. And it's this idea that maybe community property stops accruing or something. That's not how it works. In Texas, you're married until you're divorced. I don't care if your divorce takes 10 years. You're married until you're divorced. So throughout your divorce, you're going to continue to accrue community property, which is one reason why we'll advise people get your divorce done as quickly as possible. Not only so you stop paying lawyers, but so you can also stop accruing community property that has to be split. So think this through. Are you about to come into a lot of money at work or get a promotion or get some big bonus? If you continue to stay married, your spouse is going to be entitled to half of that. So sometimes with clients, we'll have to get down into the weeds and do the math. Like if we're at a mediation and, she wants another $20,000 and you've already had it, you're done, you've already given more than you want to give. Sometimes we still have to have the conversation of like, let's do the math. If you stay married, we can't even get to trial for, let's say, 3, 4, 6 months. The amount of money you guys are going to spend in lawyers' fees will likely way exceed $20,000 to go to trial. And half of that going both ways for both lawyers is going to be taken out of your pocket. You may spend the $20,000 way before you go fight about it. So it's one thing to keep in mind that you're married until you're divorced and community property will still accrue. So get in, get out as quickly as possible, getting the terms you need to protect your kids, your money, and your business. If you're a stay-at-home mom getting divorced, you're entitled to probably half of everything, some ongoing support, and perhaps even child support if you're the primary custodian of the children. So let me explain. A lot of times what I hear from women who are in this spot, they've been staying home with the kids, they gave up their career, they gave up everything and put their life on hold to raise this family, and then all of a sudden he's leaving, he found somebody else or whatever, going through a midlife thing. And he's telling them, look, it's all my money. I earned this. You're going to be left with nothing. You're not even going to be able to have primary of the kids because you don't even have a job. And somehow like making you feel worse because you prioritize your children and your family. That's not going to fly in court. Judges don't look at it like that. If you've been a stay-at-home mom, in a lot of ways, it's really going to help you once you get over some of the initial hurdles. Some of the initial hurdles you will find in filing for divorce as a stay-at-home mom are access to cash. A lot of stay-at-home moms leave all of the financial decision-making, record-keeping, and access to their husbands, right? Like they earn the money, they're the one who handles all of that. And then things have gotten to where you decide you really don't have other options but to file for divorce. You've got the immediate question of how are you going to pay a lawyer? And he sees all of the bank accounts and credit cards and everything else. So if you do, isn't he going to see it on your bank statements? So that's one of the first problems you have to solve. Another problem you have to solve is how are you going to pay for your life on an ongoing basis? That's your biggest hurdles to overcome when you're starting the divorce process as a stay-at-home mom. So for the first one, in thinking about legal fees, it's tricky. What you may need to do is ask a friend or a close family member, a relative to front you in a loan the amount of money you'll need for legal fees. So that's one option. You could perhaps take out a credit card that maybe you have sent to a best friend's house or your mom's house or something that you could use to pay for the fees. And then hopefully he's not super one of those credit report guys who would get a notice. So like be careful about that. But you can get in a sticky situation. What you can also do is ask the court for money from your estate, like if he cuts you off, because it's half your money, okay? But it's a practical problem, not necessarily a legal problem, because he may change all of the account passwords, remove your access, or maybe you never had it in the first place. So like, what are you practically going to do? You'll eventually get access to it, but a lot of lawyers, if you go to them and like, I'm a stay-at-home mom, we have a decently big estate, but I need to start the divorce process now, but I don't have any money to give you. They're going to be like, look, I really can't run on credit here. Like get a credit card or a loan or something and let somebody else be your bank. I'm the law firm. So you really need to think through the practical aspect of how you're going to afford legal fees. The next thing is going to be, how are you going to pay your bills? Like, how are you going to make sure you can put gas in your car, go to the grocery store, make your car payment, pay your rent? And that depends. If your spouse and you can't come to an agreement about maybe him continuing to put a certain amount of money in the bank, or y'all continue leaving your money exactly where it is and bills being paid like normal, you may end up having to go to court and ask the court to decide how much money you're entitled to get through like spousal maintenance or perhaps through child support, and then use that conglomeration of money to pay your bills. The court may also order additional things like order him to maintain the mortgage on the family home until it can be disposed of, or decide who gets it at the end. A court could order some of those additional payments outside of spousal maintenance or outside of child support, but that's if you go the court route. If you're a stay-at-home mom who needs to get divorced and you've cleared those initial hurdles of how to get access to some cash for legal fees and to pay your bills, once the divorce moves along, you're going to find you're entitled to pretty much half of everything that was bought or acquired during the marriage. It doesn't matter if he earned it from his job. It doesn't matter if it came from stocks or bonuses at his work. Look, your work was running a home and raising the kids. That was y'all's agreement. You will get the benefit of that agreement because of the way the law works in Texas. Texas is a community property state. That means that half of everything bought or acquired during the marriage is both of y'all's. And so no matter what he says, if he says he's not going to give you a thing, let him say that. That's not how it works. Now, the nuanced complexity to this is the ongoing access to enough money to cover the legal fees to make sure you can go the distance in the divorce to get everything that you're entitled to. And that is complicated and difficult and really unique to your situation. But hopefully you're working with a lawyer. You certainly could work with us so that we could brainstorm how to make sure you have access to enough financial resources to go the distance to make sure you get what you're entitled to.